She look like
What's good? This is your boy Tico Tren. I'm going to talk about how women go about hanging themselves in the dating market for all intents and purposes because I've always prided myself on honesty and stuff like that, and I got a lot of friends that are females who tend to always hang themselves in the dating market. And it ends up always being one of those things where it's like, yeah, you kind of sort of had it coming type thing. So I never really bother with it, to be honest with you. At the end of the day, it always ends up being one of those things where it's like, yeah, you kind of sort of had that coming. I don't know how you find this shit shocking. Um, and what I mean by that is you'll get a group of women that'll typically, do things that will hinder their dating, or they'll put blinders over their eyes, or they'll feel a certain way because somebody of a certain age hits on them for all intents purposes. And it's just like a nice little convoluted mess for all intents purposes. The best way I could put it to you. There's nothing more than a convoluted mess. So the things that I'm going to talk about today for topics is their mentality, lying and retelling stories, what they say versus what they do, bad habits, recanting their views, recanting their views of you, and my final thoughts. So those are going to be the topics for today. And it's not going to be your usual, MGTOW story. It's not going to be your usual MGTOW red pill thing. It's going to be a lot different than that. So we're going to typically be thinking and talking about a couple different things in this live stream, or this podcast, as to say. The first thing I've noticed with women is typically women seem to have this sense of false security or false entitlement for the fact that, especially when women are of a certain age, we'll say when women are like, 30, 35 plus, anything over 35, we'll say any woman over 35 or any woman over 30, 37, typically, they tend to have this false sense of sexiness for the fact that, they'll get hit on by teenagers and 23-year-old boys, basically. 29, 23, 24-year-old boys, for all intents and purposes. These typically end up being women between the ages of, like, 35 and, 35 and, we'll say 40, 35 and 40. Typically what happens with that is, you know, a boy is interested in a woman for one thing and one thing only, not to be in a relationship with her, just to have sex with her. End of story. However, women see that in their mentality, how they see it is, I'm still sexy because somebody still wants me. No, he doesn't want you. He just wants you for one night. Maybe a booty call, something along the lines of that. And that's typically how a lot. That's typically how that's typically what I found funny about a lot of women in the Western world. When it comes down to it, they have this they have this false false sense of entitlement or ego when it comes to men, because a man that happens to be in their 20s wanted them, despite the fact that they're like 35 plus, they're north of 35 plus. And typically what happens with that, like I say, the men basically just wants them for like one night, or just to stick his dick in it, basically. Experience, we'll just call it that. And this is typically where a lot of women end up hanging themselves in the dating market for this reason, because at the end of the day, psychologically, what you think and what he wants is two totally different things. What you believe and what he sees is two totally different things. What you what you want, what you think he wants, and what he actually wants is two totally different things. At the end of the day, so typically women always get themselves caught up in this false sense of I'm sexy, somebody still wants me mentality. When it's like, okay, if you consider just wanting to bang somebody's back out for one night, sex, I'm more power to you. Do you? And this is typically one of the many things that you run into with women. And I've always found it funny how women always give themselves the false sense of security. And I've always said that that feeling is really nothing. That really means nothing. If a person is hitting on you, he basically just wants to get in your pants. Especially if he's way younger than you. Especially if you have children about that person's age, they typically only want to get in your pants. Even if you don't have any children at all, but if you know you're old enough to have children almost about that person's age, they just want one thing and one thing only. They don't want an actual relationship because that's your end goal. Your end goal, what they just basically want is a booty call. They basically just want to be able to call it, smash it, and leave, basically, or call it up and smash it, or just smash it one time and call it a day for experience. It's basically like learning to ride a bike. It's the best way I could put it. And I mean, it might sound mean, but typically men of that age who wants a women of older than them typically only want to learn to ride a bike basically for experience purposes. But women don't see that, and they tend to get caught up in it, and it tends to always get conflated for their that person loves them, or that person adores them. That could be some serious relationship with a stud basically, when in fact he ain't trying to have a relationship with you. He's just trying to fuck you. And this is where women's mentality always deceive them or trick them. And it's always been one of those things that I've always found funny when it comes to women. Another problem that I have with a lot of women in the Western world is lying and retelling stories. Um, typically this happens when you're dealing with a woman, and you got some rapport with the woman, and you've actually heard multiple different things from this woman's mouth, and typically they always end up either a later retelling it, or what's up, Lamont Ellis, what's good with you, pimpin'? Typically what ends up happening is you'll run into a lot of these women that will tell you one thing, the truth at the beginning, then turn around and recant it later. um is typically how it works. Or and the sad part about that, they can never really deny it for the fact that it's in writing. Or if you were texting each other and you happen to, get it all on paper, or if you're all out at dinner, a woman would tell you some stuff while you all are out at dinner, all your friends are out at dinner, and it's one of those things where they try to recant it when you have multiple witnesses sitting there that witness the fucking shit coming out of their mouths. So what ends up happening with that is, if women will sit there and lie, women will sit there first. They'll tell the truth, and then they'll lie. They'll tell the truth, and then they'll lie, which ends up being a retelling, of that actual story that they actually told you originally. So typically, how it works is women would basically put themselves out there, to get a feel for everybody around them, and then typically they'll recant it and or retell the story. Or another thing that they'll do is they'll flip flop on a story. They'll flip flop back and forth on the story, or they'll tell you a version of the story that doesn't quite fit the original version of the story. Then they'll tell another story that doesn't quite fit the original two stories that they've told you in the first place. So typically, what you do as a man, you basically don't get judgmental about it. You basically just say, "Oh, interesting," or "Okay," or things along the lines of that. Because typically, I'm blatantly honest when it comes to it. So if I'm talking to somebody, you're going to get the raw, real, and uncut truth from me. And this is typically where a lot of the problems that comes with me when it comes to women who are interested in me, or you know are interested in me, and they typically they get their feelings hurt by some of the shit that come out of my mouth, or the way I actually tell the stuff. It's like it hurts their feelings. So typically now they start like you know backtracking on all the shit that they actually told you, you know, when you ask them a question later. Or, they typically will, or my favorite is they'll tell you something. They'll get honest with you. They'll say, oh, honesty. They'll get honest with you. They'll tell you something, and you're like, huh, interesting. And you tell your side, and then it's like they get butthurt by your side or your view, or something that you said. And typically they'll start recanting that story. And it's something I've always found funny when you actually talk to a woman, because it'll start one way, then it'll deviate off from the path, and then it'll just go off and spurt off into some other shit. And it's one of those things where like you notice that, okay, one, either she's lying last time or she's lying this time. And then when you get the next story, it's okay, either she's lying last time, this time, or the following time, basically. So it's like one of those things where it's like you're basically trying to figure out what the fuck the truth is. Typically, my whole entire things when it comes to truth is you take both stories or all three stories, and you kind of sort of take all the all the points that could possibly sound true, and you meet somewhere in the middle. So if there's like 4 or 5 stories, you basically take everything from those stories and you meet somewhere in the middle with those stories. So you take whatever was said the first time, you take whatever was said the second time, and you take a lot of the information what was said the third time, and you basically meet right there in the middle. So you basically take it and you run with it. Because typically, something that a lot of men, especially simps, tend to miss when it comes to women is women have this odd ability to tell you something, retell it, and then retake it back and retell it again, basically. So what ends up happening is a lot of times, this is I'm a preference it by saying this first. If a woman opens up to you, she's opening up to you, and she's volunteering information. That's probably the most honest she would ever be with you. That's just facts. No matter if you like it or not, that's the most factual shit that'll ever come out of her mouth. All women. That goes for all women. I don't give a damn how honest they say they are. Typically, when a woman opens up to you, that'll be the most honest shit that comes out of her mouth. Now, the sad part about that is later on in conversation, that whole entire shit that she says to you will conveniently alter or conveniently be different. This is typically why I'm talking about the lying and retelling of stories, basically. Because women are very good at doing this, and the sad part about that, if you're a male and you write it off as nagging, or if you're not paying attention, you'll miss these small keys. It's sad, but it's true. And I think women typically rely on men not to pay attention and only pay attention to them in a sexual manner. That way, they can get over on you and they can lie to you multiple times over again by keep on retelling the same story with various endings or various different outcomes for all intents and purposes. So it's one of those things where I think women rely on men not paying attention to them so they can actually lie to your face, basically. It's sad, but it happens quite often with men. Um, another thing that another thing another thing that you'll run into when it comes to women is what they say versus what they do. Like a good example of that is I'm not going to use that example because I don't want to put nobody on blast, but um, a good example is if a woman tells you one thing, but her body language and actions show another thing. Or if a woman says you're one thing, but her body language and actions show you it's another thing. Or if a woman tells you that you're this, and her body language and actions tell you that you're otherwise. Typically, what I mean by that, or what I say by that, is typically you'll run into a lot of women that'll sit up here and tell you one thing or tell you what your relationship is or what your status in a relationship is, but their actions will be totally different. A good example of that is a Moroccan. I'm gonna talk about the Moroccan to actually explain this because I don't want to bring up any other incidents. So because I don't want to bring up any other incidents that to put a certain two people on blast because I know at least one or two of them probably watch my channel and one knows about my channel now, so I'm not going to use that story to do so. Um, I'm going to use a Moroccan. There was a Moroccan that I used to talk to a while ago, not romantically, not romantically in the least bit. She was a language teacher. Um, so she was a language teacher basically. She was a language teacher that you basically you would buy, and she would basically do one-on-one sessions with you to teach you a new language. Okay, cool. So what happened with that is it's supposed to be a professional relationship. She said it was a professional relationship. She said we're only friends, this, that, and the other. Okay, cool. So we're only friends, we're only friends, we're only friends was the story that she kept telling everybody and me and herself basically. So me, I have this thing. If you ever talk to me, I have this thing. Are you trying to convince me or are you trying to convince yourself? This is typically what I ask people, or this is typically the first thought that pops into my head when somebody keeps on trying to tell me something over and over again or trying to repeat something over and over again. Are you trying to convince me or are you trying to convince yourself? And this is typically the type of thing that I've actually run into with a lot of people when it comes down to it. Now, I'm gonna continue with the story. So we're only friends. So we hang out, we do things together, we do a lot of stuff. You know, she kisses me. She kisses me on the cheek the one time. So we hang out some more. We do some other stuff. We hang out. She teaches me a couple classes. She kisses me on the lips again, again, again. It keeps on going on. She keeps on kissing me on the lips. And the one time we went to dinner, and she decided that she wanted to buy dinner, and she kissed me multiple times on the lips while we were sitting there eating. And she kept on telling me she appreciated me. But the sad part about that is we were only friends. Now, the one time I will say this, we did go out to dinner one time, and we went Dutch. And it was a nice restaurant because I basically wanted to see if it was a restaurant for take worthy for a date for all intents and purposes. So I took her because we're friends. So it's one of those things where if we're friends, you got to pay for your own shit. Okay, cool. So we're at this restaurant, very nice restaurant, very lovely restaurant. I end up using it as a date restaurant. And I remember she came late, first off. Secondly, she came dressed up nicely. And I remember we went from the restaurant to a bar. We both bought each other drinks at the bar. And we went from there to, her dropping me off and her kissing me multiple times on the lips, basically, and saying she had a fun night, basically. Now, me being from Latin America, or me being from Jamaica, if you're going to kiss me, there's one or two things wrong with this. Either you want something, or you want something, or you want something more, like you want to have fun, or you're trying to progress a relationship. It's typically how it is. Because I don't know, I don't think I've ever had somebody in Latin America kiss me on the lips and just want to be friends. That's typically one of those things. So what happened with that is apparently we kept on, I kept on going to tutoring with her so she could teach me another language. And I just ignored the shit basically. And every now and again we would hang out after tutoring session was over, and we would go out and like drink, or have a glass of wine, or something like that. And it would always end with a kiss on the lips. So that ended up being a problem. And anytime I would address it with her, she goes, "No, we're just friends." First off, one, what you not finna tell me is after kissing me multiple times, we friends. First off. Secondly, you cannot kiss me on the lips multiple times and tell me we're friends. I don't even kiss my significant other on the lips like that multiple times. I didn't kiss my significant other on the lips like that multiple times and then turn around and say we only friends. No, it don't work like that. Firstly, this is what I'm talking about with women always retelling stories and trying to repaint a narrative by the story. So she goes, "No, we're just friends. We're really good friends." Like, bitch, we ain't friends. We kissing. Like, come on now. Don't no, no, no. You can't sit up here and kiss me on my lips and then turn around and tell me we friends. I don't even kiss my children on their lips. Their mother never even kissed them on their lips. So therefore, you ain't gonna sit up here and tell me we friends. If you're gonna kiss me smack dab on the lips. This is the problem that I have with women in this modern age. And she was not just a Moroccan. She was a an American Moroccan, basically. So she's been Americanized. So she basically knows how this shit works. And I know how Moroccan work. I know how Moroccan culture works. So I know that that's not something that you do in Moroccan culture. At least without not getting stoned or have beaten to death or beat up by a male relative. You don't kiss another man on the lips if you don't plan on having a relationship with that man. That it doesn't work like that. So it's one of those things. Yes, way, Lamont. Yes, way. So it's one of those things where I've always said that I checked after that moment. I literally checked Moroccans off my list of women that I would never date again for all intents and purposes. They were added to the list of white women and black women for all intents and purposes. If you're African American woman, if you're a white woman from Americas or the Western world, I typically cross you off the list due to various things and stuff like that. Um, that is the overall problem that I've always had with women in general. Never pay attention to what they say. Pay attention to what they do because their actions speak louder than their words. It's typically how that works. Like another good example of that is if somebody's sending you pictures, and I don't mean just any old type of pictures. If they're not like just their normal run of the mill pictures, there's something up. there's something up with that relationship because typically friends don't send friends nudes. Or friends don't send friends any old type of pictures outside the realm of your normal good morning with a silly face, dressed for work type pictures. Basically, that's typically the type of pictures that men will send. I mean, friends would actually send each other. I don't ever recall my friend Bart, who is gay, sending me a nude picture of himself. I don't ever recall my friend my friend my friend Jeannie ever sending me a nude picture of herself. Nor do I recall my friend Ava sending me a nude picture of herself or anything risque of herself. And I don't recall any female friends ever sending me a nude picture of themselves. So it's typically one of those things where, like I say, it's not what they say, it's what they do. Because the sad part about that, even if you're listening to them, if their story is going to change, stop listening to them and pay attention to what they do. Um, is the best way I can actually describe it to you. Um, that being said, there's been other like things that's actually happened where like we're just friends and lines have been crossed multiple times over and over again. And the sad part about that is I've never been the one to initiate it because if we're friends, we're friends. Why are we doing this? And that's typically always been one of my biggest gripes with friends. And this is typically how I always end up losing friends or how I end up always like, just you know, just like, getting rid of friends for all intents and purposes for various odd reasons because at that point, I know now you're not being honest with me, nor are you being honest with yourself, and now you're playing games. And I hold my friends to a very high standard. So therefore, if you don't meet the standard and you want to play games and you want to go back and forth on stories, now I can't trust you. Now I have to get rid of you. Is typically how I've always viewed that. So typically, basically here's how it works. I my friends, anybody that's on my friends level, that's the highest you can get. That's the closest you could be to me. So you're going to go to the most strenuous, most craziest things to actually earn that friendship spot. Typically, I hold women that I date and women that are my friends, and anybody that's my friends and any woman that I date to a different standard. Typically, I hold women that I date to a different standard for the fact that I'm going to get to know you, so therefore we're going to build this up. So a woman that I date would never actually a woman that's dating material would never actually be friendship material because there's a lot of things that you actually got to do to actually make it up to friendship material because like I always say, friends are forever. And if you don't make it, you just got cut for all intents and purposes, or you were the weakest link. So typically, you got to watch out for women who call themselves your friends, who do certain things that go beyond, what it means to be a friend. It's one thing if you fall down or if you hurt yourself and I pat you up. That's one thing. That's something totally different. Or if you fall down and hurt yourself and you get a lesion or a cut under your shirt, that's one thing. I can deal with that. I work in the medical field. I'm cool with that. Or if you want, if you got something going on and you need me to look at it, that's fine. It's a medical thing. I can actually do that. Now, what you ain't finna do is sit up here and tell me that we friends and you're doing a little too extra to be considered a friend. Um, that's typically one of those things because, like I said, I expect a lot from my friends. What I don't expect is relationship type stuff from my friends or stuff that would be considered intimate or between two people with my friends. So typically, I let those friends stick around for a while just to earn them out, just to see what's going on with them. And then if after a while, if it doesn't change and it starts being a certain way, I typically stop. Like I typically like just let the friendship go for all intents and purposes. Um, and the irony to it is, it's like it's the only time when I'm less like a rattlesnake, so I don't give you a fair warning that it's ending. It just ends. So you never know when it's coming. You never know my my feelings on the friendship or the relationship. Typically, you just basically know You just basically know what you think you know at that point in time. Or a lot of times, a lot of people live in bliss, is the best way I can describe it to you. Another thing, moving right along, like after I said what they do. So basically, watch their body language and watch their actions more than what they're actually saying. And if a woman opens up to you initially, that's probably the most honest she'll ever be. So when she goes to retell the stories all over again, remember that story and remember the story that she's telling you now. If they don't line up in your head, there's something off. There's just something off about that whole entire thing. Bad habits. This is something that women always hang themselves in the market for doing. Bad habits. They typically will tell you some shit like um they don't like a certain type of person, or they are very hesitant about dating a certain type of person, or they don't like this about a certain type of person, and this, that, and the other. Typically, if a woman tells you some shit like that, look at her past actions. If she tells you that she doesn't like this type of guy, this type of guy, this type of guy, look at her past actions and who she dated in the past. That's a clear indicator of the type of people she actually dates. Even if she's getting old, even if the person is getting old and they're getting up there in age, typically they have the same dating habits. The sad part about that is they try to what they'll try to do is take their dating habits from their exes and they'll slap them on you. Or a lot of the they'll slap a lot of their traits onto you. So they can actually, have some reason for being a certain way towards you or acting a certain way towards you. And that's typically how it works. Like basically, when you date a woman, you're not the one that's actually dating her. You're basically the same guy that she's been with from the first relationship till now. Basically, if you start talking to a woman and start trying to date a woman, you're basically the same guy from the first guy, the second guy, the third guy, the fourth guy, the fifth guy, the sixth guy, the seventh guy, the eighth guy. You're pretty much all those guys in succession. This is typically what I talk about when I talk about women. When I talk about being women are being or acting a certain way, or when you get into a relationship they feel like they're entitled to things for all intents and purposes, or they feel like they're it's basically a habit that women do. It's a permanent habit that women have, that no matter what the relationship they get into, you're to them you're not new, so they deserve this stuff, even though you're brand new to the relationship. However, they will try to play this card where like, oh, we ain't doing that yet. We're still kind of brand new. See, well, no, you want these gifts, but you want to treat me when we get to this area. You want to treat me like I'm brand new, basically. And this is typically how women work. They have this habit where they want the relationship and they want to be spoiled from day one, but when it comes to the progression of a relationship, they typically shoot themselves in the foot by saying, "Well, no, we're still new. We're still getting to know each other. Let's hold off on that type of stuff." Okay, cool. Or they'll say something basically that they're hurt or something along the lines of that. They're hurt from a previous relationship when in fact they're actually dragging the same relationship and smacking it on you, even though you actually don't fit that mold. They're smacking it dead on you so they can get all the cash and prizes, continuation from the last relationships that they were in. It's typically how it works. That's the habit that women have. But then they'll flip around and tell you that, well, I'm not ready, or it's going to take time with me, this, that, and the other. Okay, cool. That's fine, but the sad part about that is if you're going to lie, be honest about it. If you're going to do this, like, you want all these gifts but you want to take your time, you want to be spoiled but you want to take your time because we're still new, but you treat me like I should spoil you, like we've been dating for years or weeks or months and stuff like that, but you want to pretend like it's too soon to do things or progress forward in a relationship. Okay, cool. That's a habit. We'll run with it. You can have it. What's up, McDonald? That's another habit that a lot of women have. Or another good habit that a lot of women have is that they'll try their best to shoehorn you in when they A, want to get rid of you, or B, when they're interested in you. We're trying to shoehorn you into a certain category. Um, we'll try to shoehorn you in to a certain category. What's up, Victor Creed? They'll try to shoehorn you into a certain category so they can either get rid of you or so they can, you know, uh, you know, try to date you. This is typically one of those habits that a lot of women have. Um, Good point, Victor. Um, but it's one of those things where you have to be able to pay attention to that so you can either A, avoid it, or B, get around it somehow, some way, because at the end of the day, you're just going to be screwed. Here's another one: recanting their views. Recanting their views of you, or recanting their views in general. Recanting their views. So this basically comes from the whole entire manosphere thing, where you ask a woman a question and they answer it, but it's usually not as honest as they can actually be. And then when you rephrase the question and ask them again in multiple different ways, you typically end up with an actual answer, or a smart ass answer, basically. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I just learned more. Now I'll learn more. And it's one of those things where, like, it's always good to rephrase a question to a woman. If you're going to ask a woman a question, be willing to rephrase it multiple times, almost like you're a lawyer. Rephrase it, rephrase it, or repurpose it, so you can actually represent it in front of them for all intents and purposes. Because it's always one of those things where it's like they try to hide more information than they're willing to actually let on or give for all intents and purposes on you, because they want to be their women are agreeable for all intents and purposes, and they want to be liked and loved by everyone for all intents and purposes, and they want to be treated, they want everybody to love them for all intents and purposes, the best way I can put it. So typically women will lie on their actual views on you, or they'll recant, not recant, but they'll pretty much, they'll recant their views on you for all intents and purposes if you ask them the same question over and over again, but in a different way. Um, like a good example of that is, well, no, I mean, well, if you ask a woman a question over and over again, it's typically one of those things where, like, you have to be able to actually understand things and stuff like that. A good example of, I'm going back to the lies and retelling. If a woman tells you about a man that, if you're in a relationship with a woman and she tells you about a man, I mean, tells you about something or a subject that she's all of a sudden interested in, and you're sitting there thinking to yourself, we've never talked about this. She's never talked about this. She's never been interested in this. Something's off. So what they're basically happening is she's showing interest. She's being a chameleon. She's showing interest in something that another man enjoys or likes. This is typically where the beginning of the end of your relationship is actually happening. Anytime a woman can sit up here and lie to you or tell you something basically like that, you basically got to ask them questions. Or if your girlfriend or significant other goes out with her best friends, and she comes back and she's trying to tell you what's going on that night and what she did, who she was hanging out with. Basically, that's basically a nice way so she can set up her story so you can believe the rest of her story. It's typically, oh, she was out with what's that, such and such, or this, that, and the other, and this, such and such, and this, that, and the other, and this, that, and the other, or she was over such and such house, this, that, and the other, this, that, and the other. So, depending on a setting, you're going to ask a particular question that goes with that setting. She's at the bar with her friends. What did she drink? If she's at her friend's house, which friend was it, and what the heck happened for it to be this crazy of a party, for you to end up not being able to make it back home, and stuff like that. So you're basically going to ask her questions that are specific to the setting. Like if it's a bar, what drinks did you drink? If it's she's at her friend's house, what the hell happened for you not to be able to make it home? Or if you weren't drinking, you were the designated driver, what the hell happened for you not to make it home last night? Or anything along the lines of that. Like, you know, who was a designated driver, or why did this happen? Or wait, how did that happen? Stuff like that. So you basically want her to elaborate on the story so you can basically catch her in a lie for all intents and purposes. And it's typically how a lot of this stuff works. So it's one of those things where she'll tell you something, but then if you don't get her to elaborate on it more, or get more details out of her, because the sad part about that, this is, despite the fact that men hate details, women are very good with details. So if a woman starts forgetting details, she's lying. That's typically how this shit works. If she starts forgetting details, now she's lying. because women are very good with details no matter what. They can pretty much tell you the dress that their friend had on, the fact that a chick at a bitch at the bar had the same was dressed the same way as her, so she wanted to spill a drink on a heifer, just stuff along the lines of that. So you got to watch that. And when it comes to recanting their views on you, you'll basically hear something where you ask them multiple questions. Then what ends up happening is you get the same bland ass answer, but then when you reframe the answer over again and re-ask it again, you basically get an answer from them that's either how they literally think of you and what they actually feel about you for all intents and purposes. So typically, always be willing to repackage the same question over and over again by asking it differently. So you ask one question like, "What are your thoughts of me?" Or you ask a question like, "What don't you like about me?" You'll get like some ridiculous bland ass answer from the first one, and then you ask another question like, "Overall, what do you think of me?" Something along the lines of that. So you basically take it and you basically make it a positive, then you turn it into a negative, and then you turn it into an overall. That's typically how I handle questions for all intents and purposes. As what do you like about me? What do you dislike about me? And the sad part about that, what you'll notice is you'll typically get some bland ass answer from the first answer for all intents and purposes. So that right there lets me know. That right there lets you know that obviously if you told me that there's nothing that you dislike about me, and then you tell me when I ask you again, what do you dislike about me? And you tell me there's nothing that you dislike about me, and you're telling me a bunch of positives, what she's actually trying to do is trying to keep you around long enough to so you can actually be okay with her, or be there for her for all intents and purposes. So you're basically going to just be there for her for all intents and purposes. So what you do next is ask you ask the third or fourth question by repackaging and putting a bow on it to almost like an overall look on you. And typically, after like the third or fourth or fifth time of repackaging a question, you typically get an honest answer on what they actually believe. It is what it is. And it's always one of those things where it's like they're never going to be honest with you up front anyway. So unless they just tell you some shit out of the clear blue, they're never going to be honest with you 100%. It is what it is. So it's one of those things where it's like, unless they come out of the clear blue and tell you some stuff randomly out of nowhere, or they tell you that they want to be serious, or we're both adults, be honest for all intents and purposes, then you're going to hear some honest shit. But typically, randomly, you're not going to hear any honest shit if you're talking to these people. Is pretty much how it works. And the sad part about that is when I'm talking about recanting views, it went from nothing to now there's something. Okay, so what you're basically telling me now is you're lying. You're a liar now, basically. This is typically one of those things when you as a man, your ears should perk up when you ask a woman a certain question, and she starts doing stuff like this where she'll tell you nothing, or nothing, even if it's positive or negative, nothing. Then you ask another question, then all the shit comes out of nowhere conveniently. So it's like one of those things where it's like, oh wow, interesting. So when I asked that question the first two times, you were lying. Or when I asked that question the very, very first time, you were definitely lying. So it's one of those things where it's like, there's something all wrong with that. So now you need to pump the brakes on that shit. And like Win said with the last topic, Princess Brad complex, basically, um, is typically how it works. So when you get into stuff like this, you'll notice this shit, and it's one of those things where it's like, if she can't be honest, she just can't be honest, or if she's going to recant her story, or recant her views or her story on you, or lie and retell a story over again. You run into various problems with this. So you don't really want to get involved or deal with people who typically do this to you. If they're going to recant their stories or retell their stories, or retell recant their views of you, or tell their views of you after they done told you some bullshit for the first few times about yourself, you typically don't really want to deal with that person, because that person can't be honest at that point. or their honesty requires a lot of fucking dragging shit out of them, basically, and that's just too much work if you want to be in an honest relationship with a person. So what happens with that is typically the more you learn about this person and the reactions to you and their and how they view you and all this other great shit, and you learn about exes in the past, basically, you typically get a bigger picture of what you're actually dealing with. So it's always one of those things where it's like, if you conveniently match her ex, you're pretty much on the road for a relationship. If you don't match her ex, then you're pretty much being friend zone. So it's typically one of those things where, and if you're friend zone, you're not going to get craziness or ridiculousness like kisses on the lips for no fucking reason whatsoever, or some off the wall shit from that woman that normally would be reserved for significant others. So they're not going to send you random shit that will normally be reserved for people that you're actually trying to mess with or date. Um, Another good example of retelling views that I've actually ran into is 1 minute it's one thing. One thing is 1 minute they'll tell you 1 minute they'll tell you one view on you as far as like lust and love. Then the next thing you know it, they're retelling the story and trying to make it seem as if they were trying to, you know, pry information out of you or trying to be, Nancy Drew for all intents and purposes. Um, it's one of those things where I've always laughed at when I see it happen, because like if you have it, you remember what they said. They conveniently can forget what they said, and what they said before apparently doesn't matter. So now what they're actually saying now is supposed to be the God's honest truth now. So typically with that is there's a lot of stuff that's going into that. Either A, there's a lot of mixed emotions, or B, there's a lot of mixed emotions there, so they don't know what the fuck's going on with themselves internally. So it could be anything where they're catching feelings for you or they're falling for you, and they don't know how to relate them to you. So therefore, they act very shady, or they act like they'll try to push you away or do various things to make it so that you're not catching on to what they're actually doing or trying to do or trying to portray themselves or how they're actually trying to carry themselves for all intents and purposes. So this is typically something that they'll do. They'll retell their views on you based on how they see you or anything like as far as like what they think of you to their thoughts of you in romantic manner or a sexual manner, or things along the lines of that, or they'll basically tell their views to try to make it sound like it was nothing. Basically what's happening there is they're trying to push you away because they're really catching feelings for you, and it's one of those things where it's like they're trying to maintain frame. Typically this is where maintaining frame actually comes into play, because women typically suck at it, but they tend to be the ones who typically maintain frame. Men don't maintain frame, men basically just do. So it's one of those things where women do all the maintaining of frame when it comes to shit like that, because they don't want to be seen as weak, or they don't want to be hurt, or they don't want any of this shit to basically happen to them. This is typically what you run into with a lot of these women, especially if they're interested in you, and they start and feelings start getting deeper, or they start like catching the bonds are starting to get deeper, and they're starting to get very very close to you, but they don't want to admit it, or they do a lot of shit, but then they push you away. Typically what's happening there is they're trying to maintain their frame and not trying to be vulnerable for all intents and purposes, because a lot of times women would get very vulnerable with you, not realizing that they're vulnerable with you, or they would get very vulnerable with you, but then they would act a certain way. They would start pushing you away or acting a certain way because their vulnerability was starting to show. And typically these are typically women. Think of it like this: the reason why women never approach men in a relationship to start a relationship is for the simple fact that they don't want their ego hurt or their emotions hurt, because basically what they're told in this world that everybody wants them, so therefore everybody should want them. But if everybody wants them, then in all technicality they should be able to walk up to a man. If you actually take that view, they should walk up to any man and any man should want them. But women don't do that. So what happens with that is women will never ask a man out for the fact that there's a lot of pride and ego that goes into that, and there's a lot of they're basically trying to protect their emotions and everything surrounding that very feeling that they feel about you. So typically, women will start getting either very pushy with you, or they'll start saying things to push you away. So, and then pretend like they didn't say it, because plausible deniability. Y'all know about plausible deniability. Let me tell you, I shouldn't have to tell you about that shit, because plausible deniability, they don't have to actually fess up to the shit that they just did. So it's one of those things where it's like it's a roller coaster with them. And typically with these women have either been in fucked up relationships, had a fucked up childhood, had a fucked up life, or did just made fucked up choices in their lives to get them to where they are today. Is what you'll run into with a lot of these women. It's sad, but it happens. And the sad part about that, what a lot of these women don't really understand, is, as I'm transitioning into my final thoughts, what a lot of these women don't understand about this whole entire thing is, when it comes down to it, you're hanging yourself in the dating market by doing all this stuff, this back and forth shit, and trying to act hard one time and act soft one time, act hard another time, act soft another time. You're basically killing your chances in a dating market. And that's typically how it works. Now, women will say, well, that's good that I'm killing my chances in the dating market, but deep down inside, women want love, and women want affection, and women want attention, and like women like to be treated special for all intents and purposes. So there's no woman alive that actually believes this shit wholeheartedly. All women like to be treated special, or like to feel special. It don't matter how cold-hearted the woman is. It don't matter if she's a fucking CEO and you call her Miss Grinch or Ebenezer Scrooge. All women like to feel special. There's not a woman alive that doesn't like to feel special. Even the most evilest women alive like to feel special. So it's always one of those things where it's like, it's a constant fight. And this is basically one of those things where, like, women will act like they don't like to feel that way, or they'll pretend like they don't like to feel that way, or they'll get vulnerable after you do something nice for them, but then they try to get hard with you, so they won't show too much emotion or feelings, or have too much attachment, or show themselves as being very submissive with the person. They'll typically fight it with a negative feeling, or by trying to put you down and or say negative things about you so you can change. The sad part about that is, never change who you are. The sad part about that is, who you are is what got you into the door in the first fucking place. And if you're in a relationship, who you were in the beginning of the relationship is what got you in the door in the first damn place. Never let a woman change you. If you're in a relationship, or if you're starting a relationship, or you're in a relationship, never let a woman change anything about you. Because the sad part about that is, the only reason why a woman's trying to change you is because she's scared that another woman will come in and take you. Because as long as you act this certain way, her position is always at threat. Her position is always threatened by another woman. And last I checked, in all my lives, I've actually never cheated on anybody I've ever actually been in a relationship with. Because my views on cheating is, I don't feel like cheating for two reasons. One, I'm too lazy to cheat. And two, I'm too lazy to be sitting up here trying to tell a bunch of lies. I don't like to think of a lie to have to reinforce a lie. And I don't like to have to think of a lie to reinforce that lie. So typically, I just tell the truth. So it's one of those things where it's like, I'm not going to cheat for this reason, because I'm just too lazy to. It requires way too much mental space. It requires way too much energy. And it requires way too much emotion to go into this shit. And I don't cheat for this very reason, because it's pointless to me. And I don't feel as though it's even necessary for me to actually do so. So I would never cheat on somebody for this reason, because no. Because if I'm going to actually do some cheating, I'm not going to cheat. I'm just going to break up with you. What I can't sit up here and do is pretend like I like you and then go cheat on you. Like, my whole entire view is, like, I've actually said this when it comes to threesomes. I've actually been in threesomes. I've been in foursomes. I've been in fivesomes. I've been in sixsomes. That's neither here nor there. But the problem that I have with threesomes. What's up, overly fat man? I like that. That's a good one. The problem that I have with threesomes is, the minute you can bring up threesomes, I become uninterested in that person, because to me, the actual thoughts in my head is, if she's going to suggest threesomes, what else is she going to suggest? Or what else is she into? Or what else is she trying to hide for her to want to bring up threesomes? Because typically, if a woman's bringing up threesomes, 8 out of 10 times, she's probably cheated on you already, and she feels guilty about it. So now she's trying to do threesomes to make you feel good about it. This is typically one of those things. Or she's bringing up threesomes, she's bored with you, and what's the point of continuing this relationship if she wants a threesome? That's pretty much my thoughts on it. And my things with threesomes is anytime I've actually been in a relationship with a woman that wanted a threesome, I've actually went through with the threesome, and then I broke up with her right there shortly thereafter. So basically, I'll do the threesome, get my shit, put my clothes back on, and walk out the door. Or I'll lay there, go to sleep, wake up the next day, and go, "We're breaking up." It's that simple. So it's one of those things where it's like I would never do a threesome for the fact that either A, you're cheating, or B, this relationship is no more if you got to bring extra people into a relationship. It'd be no different than you having your ridiculous or retarded best friend trying to tell you about your relationship, and that heifer's not even a relationship. I basically view that the same way, at the same caliber. Either you're cheating on me, or you're planning on dumping me or breaking up with me. Therefore, we need to break up any fucking way. So anytime I've actually ever been involved with a threesome or more, I typically just broke up with that woman right after it was done. We're done. No more. That's my honest views on that. So I've never actually cheated on a woman in the first place to do so because I don't really deem it necessary. I know. I know where you're from. That's why I was laughing. I was like, oh, I know. I basically was laughing because I knew where you were actually from. What's up, Seeker? So typically, when it comes to that, I don't cheat for, like I said, because I'm just too lazy to cheat. There's no point in cheating. I'm way too fucking lazy for that shit. It's way too pointless for me. And what is the fucking point of cheating in the first fucking place? Because now I gotta lie. Now I gotta make up an excuse. Now I gotta have enough energy to have sex with two fucking people and shit. And it's just then I gotta tell a lie to reinforce that lie on where I was. Like I ain't got time for that shit. That's why I've never cheated on a woman. And the sad part about that is this is typically one of those things where it's like I have every opportunity to cheat, but why would I want to cheat? And it's one of those things where like I've always remained high value for the fact that if when I'm in a relationship with a woman who approaches me, they don't get me, and basically either A, they'll try harder, or B, they'll try to sabotage my relationship, basically. And it's always ends up being one of those things where it's like women would try harder because women, believe it or not, women like a challenge. So if you're in a relationship, you're more attracted to a woman when they find out you're in a relationship. It's typically how this shit works. You're more attracted to a woman when they find out you have kids. You're more attracted to a woman when they find out, you got a lot of shit going on for you for all intents and purposes. And that's pretty much what it is. I agree with Seeker on that one. But the sad part about that is because when you're dealing with this stuff, you typically run into the various problems of women hanging themselves in relationships or in a relationship market for all these various facts. They'll typically lie, retell the story, or they'll claim certain views of you, but then they'll recant those views. They'll recant those views and tell you some different views that they have of you for all intents and purposes. So it's always been one of those things where if 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 you know what their exes are and you happen to fit that mold, keep on going down that road. The sad part about that is I'm sorry, I can't. When it comes to people's exes, I'm not your ex. I'm not going to ever be your ex. Um, this is typically one of those things. I'm not going to ever really truly be one of those things because typically what I've noticed about a lot of women that are single or single mothers is there's this running joke that I always have with a lot of these single mothers because when they get cheated on with like they just get cheated on and it'd be like ridiculous. It's like it's just the ridiculous shit that they get themselves into. So it's one of those things where it's like they get cheated on and then they want to try to say that people that act like this cheats on everybody when in fact I can't. Like I look at it like this: all men are dogs. It's basically one of those things where all men are dogs. Now they're actually trying to lump you in that group with being a dog, despite the fact that they've never ever had sex with you or they've never been in a relationship with you and they've never actually got around to actually getting to know you. Well, they got to know you, but they always try to put you in that category and try to act scared that you're going to do the same damn thing when in fact you're not. Or they try to actually paint you in a certain way, similar to their exes, so they can actually justify treating you a certain way. It's typically how it works. Um, but at the end of the day, if you know you're not that, it's basically what I say about what's about one friend who's dating a woman who always accuses him of cheating. Look, pimpin', if you know you're not cheating, don't even play into it. Ignore her. Because 9 times out of 10, if you're cheating, or she accuses you of cheating, or she projects her ex boyfriend's behavior onto you before you even get started in a relationship, she's either cheating or she's done something that made herself feel guilty. So now she's going to try to project it onto you for all intents and purposes. That's if you're starting a relationship or you're beginning a relationship, or she's scared what you're going to do to her. Because typically, when it comes down to it, I've always had this I've always had this mentality that came from my grandparents, where never get into a relationship unless you're willing to walk away. And people take that as me not caring about them or me not loving them or me being arrogant when it comes down to it. It's none of the above. What it comes down to is I don't like to argue. I just don't like to argue. What is the point of arguing if I know it's not going to be fixed or corrected or it's going to be a continuous thing? Why stay like that when I don't have to? Or why try to keep on building some shit when I'm going to be mistreated anyway or yelled at for no fucking reason whatsoever? Why stick around with somebody that's unhappy? Now you're trying to make me unhappy. Why stick around with somebody that's unhappy? And that's typically how I've always viewed it. So it's not one of those things where like I'm going to walk, because I've actually never walked away from anybody that I've actually been in a relationship with, but I will walk away from somebody who has either cheated on me or mistreats me or misuses me or abuses me for all intents and purposes. So typically, this is where that whole entire quote actually comes from. Never get into a relationship unless you're willing to walk away. And it's always been one of those things. And I've never had to walk away from a relationship, luckily. It's always been one of those things where it's like some tragic struck or something happened where, like, it sucks for all intents and purposes. But it's always been one of those things where it's like I've never been bothered by it. And I've always had my wits about me, and I've always been able to control my emotions enough so I don't fall for that type of trap or fall for anything. Because the sad part about that, the more you get into a relationship with a woman, the more she tries to pull the wool over your eyes, so you can't see who she really is for all intents and purposes. Because typically, women will hide the fact that they're clusterfucks in the beginning of a relationship. Because women typically send their representative for all intents and purposes. But then on top of that, any type of relationship, women, even a friendship, women always try to send a representative. But you can typically tell where it's going based on how they're treating you, how they act towards you, and what they're actually doing and sending and, you know, doing to you or sending your way for all intents and purposes. So it always ends up being one of those things where it's like, well, this can't be this anymore because these actions were being portrayed by this person, or this can't be this anymore because of this. So you basically have to be able to weigh your pros and cons in a relationship with a woman so you can determine if that woman's there for you or not for all intents and purposes. Because if she's not, there's no point in keeping her around. There's no point in even doing anything with her. And you might as well just get rid of her for all intents and purposes. Because if she can't stay consistent, she's not worth your time. And the funny thing about that is what I've always said is on that note is women would typically do this on a regular basis to basically keep you off balance and not be able to focus on what's going on. That way you're focused on one thing and they're just throwing other shit at you, other things at you for all intents and purposes. It's typically how that works. And to answer your question, overly fat man, yes, pretty much every single woman I've ever dated has not been from the United States. There you go. Everyone I've ever dated has never been from the United States or any of the Western worlds. They typically come from Latin America or the back half of the Asian portion of the Soviet bloc for all intents and purposes. Um, or they come from Asia, for all intents and purposes, or Asia for pretty much most of all of Asia for all intents and purposes. So that's typically one of those things. But continue right along with the lovely stuff. Never get involved with a woman who is willing to recant their views on you, or retell their views on you, or retell you a story for all intents and purposes. Never get into a relationship with a woman who will tell you one story, then go back on that story, then retell another story. Because the sad part about that just takes way too much fucking mental gymnastics to do. But what I typically, a rule of thumb, when you actually get told two different stories, basically take the first one, take the second one, or however many others that you've been told, take everything, and wherever it is in the middle of all that fucking shit that they told you, that's basically the truth for all intents and purposes. So take all the stories that you heard, the different variations of that story you heard, pretty much go take all the shit and stand right in the middle and pull shit from each of those ones, and that's probably the truth about what actually happened with that story, or what it is for all intents and purposes. So yeah, y'all be blessed. Have a good one. Take care of yourselves. Treat yourselves like milk you but spoil yourselves. Always approve yourself and always improve upon yourself to make yourself a better version of yourselves. Always spoil yourselves. And this goes for everybody from all walks of life. This is not just for men. This is for everybody. Teenagers, Apache helicopters, I don't give a damn what you are, T-Rex. If you want to call yourself a trans, whatever the fuck, this is for you too. Always approve yourself and always approve upon yourself and make yourself a better person. This goes for women also, same thing. So this message goes across the board for everyone. Be blessed, be good, take care of yourselves, and always look out for yourselves, because at the end of the day, if you're the only person that would ever love yourself. Nobody will ever love you as much as you love yourself. And at the end of the day, the shit that happens to you is only happening to you because you let it happen to you. So anything that ever happened to you, it's only because you let it happen to you for it to continue. Let it be a relationship or a woman doing stupid shit to you, or a woman using you for finances or anything along the lines of that. The only reason why it's happening is because you're letting it happen. But I'm gonna leave y'all with the outros, y'all two favorite outros that y'all love very dearly. Y'all be blessed and have a good one. Run that CGI talking Indian woman. Okay. I'll run that one too. So I'll run 3 different outros for y'all guys.
Black back, do diamonds on me, go flash this ain't Snapchat, cause I didn't get
For the moment.
my baby mama that do intake.
This video is for mature audiences. If you're watching this and you're underage, fuck you, fuck your face and fuck your day. This video is for mature audiences. If you're watching this and you're underage, fuck you, fuck your parent and fuck your day. This video is for mature audiences. If you're watching this and you're underage, you have shitty parents or parent and should be shit slapped. This video is for mature audiences. If you're watching this and you're underage, you have shitty parents or parent and they should be sterilized.
Y'all be blessed. Have a good one. Love you guys. Take care of yourselves. It's a pleasure serving the community and the philosophy. Be blessed. Good night, everybody.